Hey guys, before we get started, I'm going to make sure that y'all can hear me and see my screen. If you can, please give me a shout out. Let me know. Merry Christmas, Christian. Hey, Alan. How are you? Is it warmer down there? Because it's freaking cold up here in Atlanta this morning. It was like 29 degrees when I left the house today. Hey, Natalie. Hey, Jeff. Y'all, this is like my favorite part of webinars. Like people saying hi to me. Jeff Chase and Eckler. People saying hi to me and me being like, hey, how are you? Hey, Monica. Good morning, Tanya. Like, for real, this is like my favorite part. I'm like, everybody talk to me. Can y'all see our screen okay? Should say making short-term rentals work. Christian, can you see my screen okay? Okay, thank you. All right, what time is it? Okay, we're going to get started. So thank y'all for joining us today. My name is Jessica Reynolds. I'm the Director of the Office of Downtown Development, and this is our last webinar for 2019. Oh my gosh, I can't believe 2020 is going to be here before we know it. But I had the pleasure of experiencing this presentation firsthand at our DCA Fall Conference back in October. And it's one of those things that I go to a lot of presentations and go to a lot of conferences, and usually I'm in the back, and most of the time I'm focused. And then every now and then I find a presentation that just like kind of enthralls me, and I start taking like copious notes. And when I start taking copious notes, I'm like, this would probably be good for our network to hear. Because if I'm up here learning stuff and taking tons of notes and thinking, okay, how could I apply this? How could other people apply this? And I'm sure everybody else would have kind of the same thought. So I reached out to our Office of Planning and Research, which put this on at the DCA Fall Conference, and said, guys, I need you to come on and do this for me so I can get it on the record, and so I can share it with our managers, and so we can, just put it out there for the world to see and start being proactive versus reactive when it comes to addressing the need for short-term rentals and how you make that work in your downtown and your community. So with me today, I have Dr. Tyler Reinagel from, Tyler, did I say that right? Reinagel. I can never say it correctly.
Mind you, we've been working together for 3 years.
Yes.
She still can't get it.
Okay, I couldn't say Bithia's last name until she left, and now she works at City of Atlanta. I can't say it, and I'm like, you don't even work here anymore. He is the director of the Office of Planning and Research, and he's also my partner in crime here at DCA. We get in lots of trouble together. And then with us, we have Jackson Lilly, who is our Government Research Coordinator and a newer member to the Office of Planning and Research team, but still a very valuable contributor. So I'm excited to have you guys here, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Tyler.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica, and as always, thank you for inviting us to be a part of the discussion. Obviously, comp planning and research and hotel motel tax and everything that goes along with our work in planning and research, the more we can tie that in with downtown development and building more vibrant, more sustainable communities around the state, the better off we are. I'm also going to be self-indulgent for a minute because I know he will not sing his own praises, but Jackson Lilly, my colleague who, along with me, lives and breathes all things hotel motel tax, he recently completed his master's degree at Georgia State. And Jessica's hands go up at celebration here in our office, but we're very well versed in all things hotel motel tax and a great resource for anybody across the state. So please reach out to us. You now have me and my graduate degrees and Jackson and his graduate degrees. So always happy to help however we can. So as Jessica mentioned, we had given this presentation initially at the DCA Fall Conference at the Great Wolf Lodge down in LaGrange about 2 months ago, and a lot of really good questions came about as a result of this. Speaking of short-term vacation rentals, the impact that they have on our communities and how we can prepare and best respond to these, throughout the state of Georgia, urban, rural, and all points in between. So we're going to have an opportunity today to kind of go through some basics on short-term vacation rentals, and then throughout the presentation, you can submit those questions written on the interface you've got. And Jessica will facilitate a discussion about these short-term rentals as we get toward the end of the presentation. So a basic outline of what we're going to talk about today, start off talking a little bit about how to approach these short-term vacation rentals in your community. I'm going to focus on some policy considerations and things to keep in mind as you discuss new ordinances, new regulations, new structure for accommodating those short-term vacation rentals. Then I'm going to hand it over to Jackson, who's going to talk about some best practices in developing ordinances to handle those short-term rentals in your community. He's also going to give us a look at how a couple of other states handle short-term rentals. It is a state-by-state distinction, so there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from other states that have already gone through this experience. Then I'm going to give an example of a successful implementation of short-term vacation rental regulation and registration in the state, that coming from the city of Savannah. And then Jackson's going to talk a little bit about different reporting changes that we've got here at DCA and other resources we have available for your use before we open it up for the Q&A facilitated by Jessica toward the end. So the first and most fundamental question before we even get into talking about how to approach short-term vacation rental policies in your cities and counties is, what exactly is a short-term vacation rental? Now, we're all familiar with hotels, your Hiltons, your Marriotts, your Holiday Inns, different motels, different campgrounds, bed and breakfasts, the operations that typically need to get a business license and are going through the taxation and regulation process that has existed for many, many years, predating me, predating Jessica, predating Jackson. But the short-term vacation rental is a new phenomenon. It is the Airbnb or the VRBO, the short-term vacation rental websites, where you can go on and rent a house or rent an apartment for a short-term stay in a community when there isn't necessarily a hotel available, or when you want to look for an alternative to a hotel. It's a new phenomenon. It's the gig economy, as the internet aficionados like to call it, and provides that interface and that accessibility for both property owners who want to make a few extra bucks on their property, as well as visitors who don't necessarily want to go through the hotel process. The problem is regulation, and it's a discussion that you have regarding business licenses, regarding codes and safety, and in the case of Jackson and I, one that regularly came up in our discussion of hotel-motel excise taxation across the state. So whenever we talk about short-term vacation rental, or STVR as you see on the slide here, we're referring to just that, the Airbnb and VRBO type websites that allow property owners to rent out for short periods of time apartments or houses, condos, or other accommodations that folks can use for those brief windows. So when we're talking about the impact that these short-term vacation rentals have on our community, what exactly is it that we need to keep in mind? The biggest thing is how dynamic these short-term rentals are. It's easy to think of it as a pretty straightforward occasion whenever you're renting one of these hotels. If you're going to visit a community, or I'm sorry, I keep saying hotels. Forgive me, renting one of these short-term rentals. You go visit a community, you pay through your credit card on the app, you have a place to stay for a few nights before you head back home. But thinking about it from a local government perspective, it's a lot more dynamic than that. There are zoning considerations. A lot of times these are single-family houses that are in residentially zoned areas that are being used for a business purpose. There's also the taxation question. As I mentioned, Jackson and I live and breathe the hotel-motel excise tax, so one of the most common questions we've had across the state is whether Airbnb, VRBO, and other short-term rentals are susceptible or responsible for collecting the sales and use tax, the $5 fee, the hotel-motel excise tax. It's a common question that we need to think of as local government leadership. There's also a question on the property owner side of their own property rights. If they own this property and pay their property taxes, don't they have the right to do with it what they want? A perfectly reasonable question, but one that needs to be discussed in the context of local government leadership. And also safety. We all thrive on communities. We know our neighbors. When we walk our dogs or when we're out for a morning run, we see the same faces. We know the same people. We're comfortable with our neighbors. So when it's a revolving door of visitors in these short-term rentals, are there safety concerns that we need to think about? The dynamic nature of these short-term rentals is an important consideration as you start to think about policies moving forward in your community. There's also an enforceability challenge. A lot of communities, many communities, are strapped for resources. Many different individuals within City Hall or within the county administration building are taking on different responsibilities, and the capacity really isn't there to police or enforce regulations that may be put into place. So it's important to think ahead of time about the capacity that your community and your jurisdiction have before you put these regulations on the books. You also need to think about the large variance in the type of short-term rentals that exist. Short-term rental market in Buckhead, where you have high-rise apartment buildings, is going to differ a lot from what you may have in Camilla, where folks come to rent a large 2- or 3-bedroom house for a long stay to visit family and friends. You're going to get all sorts of variations, so no two communities are going to have the exact same challenges, and it's important to consider what the marketplace in your community looks like before moving forward. So with those considerations in mind, what exactly do local governments need to look at? And this is a non-exhaustive list of policy considerations that we've developed here at DCA, but some that address some of the bigger concerns that exist across the state in discussions that we have had in rural and urban communities alike. The first and most prominent discussion that comes up is safety and security. Residents want to know what's happening around them. They want to know who's in their community. They want to know what they need to be keeping an eye out for to make sure that they preserve that sense of community, that sense of safety and security that they have in their own home and in their own parks, their own public spaces and restaurants, parks, amphitheaters, trails. That safety is an important part of where we all live. So some of the things that have proven successful in other communities are what you see listed here on the screen. That includes a public registry of all short-term vacation rentals, so residents can go on to a city or county website and look up what properties are registered as short-term rentals, knowing that there are going to be different people coming through those properties. Requiring a local agent to be designated. In the event that there is a problem that comes up in the middle of the night, perhaps a late-night party in an area that's a residential community and has to get up and go to work and school the next morning, somebody needs to be on the ground in the community and able to respond to any problems that may come up. If it's an absentee property owner who's based out of New York or Los Angeles or somewhere not in the community, they won't be able to respond to those issues immediately. Third, requiring owners to give notice to their neighbors. As I mentioned a couple of times already, folks want to know what's happening next door. They want to know what's happening on their street and on their block or in an urban area in their building. So letting neighbors know that there are going to be visitors coming in for these short-term rentals is an important part of many policies and many ordinances that have been adopted. Fourth, the non-residential building and safety code requirements. As we mentioned earlier, hotels and bed and breakfasts that are responsible for registering as a business are also using their properties in a commercial way, and as such are responsible for commercial building requirements and safety codes. Well, if a home or an apartment building is being used for a short-term rental, should they be susceptible to the same building and safety codes? That's a question to be debated at the local level and addressed in these ordinances. And then lastly, from a safety and security perspective, the rental insurance requirements. Having the appropriate insurance coverage and making sure that the property owner and community are protected in the event of an unfortunate event, some sort of accident or natural disaster, making sure that the coverage meets the needs of these businesses or these short-term rentals being used for business purposes. Other local policy considerations include preventing disruptions. So if you have a larger property and limited parking, that becomes a serious issue. And when we talk later about the Savannah example of appropriate regulation and enforcement of these ordinances, that's going to be part of the discussion. The Savannah Historic District, for those of you that have been down to that part of the state, you know parking is limited. So making sure that there's some sort of regulation and the ordinance addresses parking regulations and parking limitations are very important to making sure that these short-term rentals continue to be good neighbors, so to speak, in the communities where they exist. Also, preserving neighborhood character and historical status. Once again, Savannah is the prime example of this, the historic district being an incredible tourist destination for all of us across Georgia and really getting visitors from around the country and the world. making sure that the historical nature of the district in Savannah is preserved was critically important as they were developing their ordinances and regulations. So putting a certain cap on the number of short-term rentals in an area or subdividing different types of properties for zoning purposes is an important consideration in the development of ordinances. And lastly, the consideration that hits most close to home for both Jackson and I is the generation of hotel-motel tax revenue. Now, for those of you who are unaware, the hotel-motel tax, and Jackson will talk more about this a little later, is imposed by nearly 300 communities across the state, and during fiscal year 18 generated over $285 million in revenue for the support of communities' efforts to promote tourism and for tourism product development and the construction of things like visitors and welcome centers, amphitheaters and performing arts centers, and putting wayfinding signage in downtown areas to better brand communities. It's an incredible resource for communities, and we want to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share. So thinking about how to enforce and collect that excise tax in appropriate communities is critically important as a part of that ordinance that may be adopted. We're always happy to help with discussions of this tax revenue, but consultation with the city or county attorney is also important, as DCA cannot provide any legal guidance or legal counsel for your community. And with that non-exhaustive list of policy considerations, I'm going to hand it over to Jackson, who's going to talk to us about the best practices in developing these ordinances moving forward.
All right, thank you, Tyler and Jessica, for those introductions. I'm going to talk about sort of less specific things to keep in mind, not actual policies you can enact, but as you develop this, as you discuss the needs for your community, what are things that you should consider? And one of the big things first is to keep in mind that some businesses that might not be using these popular platforms will be affected by ordinances that you put in place as a result of Airbnb or VRBO. So just some venues that might have accommodations, some bed and breakfasts, and things of that nature. So as you develop new language in an ordinance for short-term vacation rentals, it's important to think about how that's going to impact some of your other small businesses. Another key point is to distinguish between regulatory and performance compliance. On that end, to avoid subjectivity as much as possible, which will help you avoid complaints and legal challenges, and to also maintain practicality and enforcement. For instance, regulatory compliance is easily proven and enforced. An example would be required license must be posted outside of the rental and visible from the street. And you compare something like that to performance compliance, where rental cannot generate noise that interferes with the neighborhood. That would be difficult to measure and almost impossible to enforce uniformly. When determining enforceability, it's also key to understand what kind of data limitations you'll have. These platforms have often proven willing to assist in many cases, but primarily in larger markets and with tax collection rather than density or nightly restrictions. So if a community wants to adopt an ordinance that would put a restriction in a historical district or make Airbnbs only seasonal, for instance, they can book for 90 nights out of the year, the platforms are less frequently willing to work with you as much as they are tax collection or accounting purposes. And there are then some scenarios where the platforms don't provide all the data necessary to enforce the policy in the interest of protecting their host's privacy. So before enacting any legislation or adopting any new ordinances, it's important to understand those limitations before enacting the policy. So have that conversation first, because Airbnb and VRBO do have a tendency to protect the privacy of their hosts. All right. And while Tyler and I specifically don't have any hands-on experience with which of these policies will work best, we have had a number of conversations with local officials who are on the front lines of this. So based on those conversations, we can help you figure out which policies might work best. We can provide some insert as to what other local governments in Georgia are doing. We do try to keep a running list of all the communities with local ordinances. And that can be valuable as you determine what sort of policies will work for you, as you think about what other cities in your region have adopted them across the state, similar in population size, and how they structure their registration processes with fees, penalties, and what worked for them and what didn't. So based on some of our research and conversations with Georgia cities and counties who have some larger concentrations of the rentals, we can provide some insight as to what's been tried and what kind of tools are out there. And you'll see a couple of different examples here. I believe these are the definitions that the City of Savannah uses. But to redefine what's an occupant or a hotel operator, to include some of the accommodations booked from these platforms. All right. And with our regular hotel motel tax presentation, some of you might have seen, we break down this lodging receipt. And as we talk about what is regulated at the state level, what's regulated at the local level, it's important to break down that total hotel motel lodging receipt. And at the top there, you'll see the sales and use tax, the 6 to 8.9%, that includes the 4% state sales and use tax, is currently in Georgia collected by the hotel operator and remitted to the Department of Revenue. So that's separate than the excise tax that we frequently talk about, ranging from 2 to 8%, which is collected directly by the local government and maintained and spent by the local government. And then we have the state hotel motel fee, $5 per room per night, which is also collected by the Department of Revenue. So as we consider how other states approach this, how Georgia might approach this, it's important to distinguish between which aspects of the total hotel motel bill goes towards which entities. So these are the different states across the country that currently have some sort of arrangement with Airbnb. Georgia is currently one of 4 states that has nothing in place at the state level. There's a pretty wide range of that, from just stating that they must collect the sales and use tax to imposing statewide registration requirements. But as you see here, 46 out of the 50 states do have some sort of regulation in place. So at the moment, we can't really hypothesize what that might look like for Georgia, but it's possible that change would be coming in the future. And so with that said, I'll go into how a couple of those states have decided to collect those taxes. And of course, the bargaining power of states are much higher than some smaller local governments, so the platforms seem to work with them with little resistance. The majority of that state involvement has to do with the collection of state sales and use taxes, or state level hotel taxes where that applies. So in Georgia, that would involve the 4% state sales tax, as well as local sales and use taxes that are remitted directly to DOR. It would also include that $5 state hotel fee should the General Assembly choose to apply that to the short-term vacation rentals.
So let me break this down for people who are, not familiar with all this. So you're saying basically right now there's nothing on the state level that says they have to pay that $5 hotel fee.
Correct. The $5 hotel fee, there's not. In some cases, if they would require these rentals to have a business license, they would be subjected to some of the sales and use taxes. But right now, that $5 fee is only for hotels, traditional hotels. And
that the sales tax and stuff, that's going to be, again, based off of whatever local legislation you have, because there's nothing on the state books that would.
Correct. Local legislation requiring them to have a business license to operate.
Okay. Got it. Cool.
All right. So this would, of course, not include the hotel motel excise tax levied and collected by the local governments. While some states have mechanisms in place to ease the collection burden on smaller jurisdictions, local tax collection is still frequently left to be worked out between hosts and city and county governments. There are a number of services which integrate with Airbnb to automate tax collections, but those would be subscribed to by the host if they don't wish to file their own taxes, assuming the local government is not able to negotiate an individual agreement with the platforms. So Airbnb has a list on their website of all the local governments, both at the state level, local, and actually different countries as well, where it has agreements with. Many cities, in addition to the state, will have agreements to collect their local tax and track host compliance as well. But again, those are primarily the larger tourist cities across the country. There's not many cases where a smaller jurisdiction is able to negotiate with Airbnb and set it up. That's often done at the state level for local jurisdictions. While these are primarily local jurisdictions, One key point we've also heard is to be conscious of how these agreements affect access to data on short-term vacation rentals in your city. If the platform is willing to collect from and track hosts in your city, understand they may not be as transparent as you would like in their efforts to protect the privacy of their hosts. So now I'm going to talk about two states in particular that have passed sort of opposing legislations to regulate at the state level. The first is going to be Tennessee, where recent legislation in Tennessee effectively bans the prohibition of short-term vacation rentals, with a few exceptions to protect both the interests of hosts and local governments. So the law provides a legal recourse for any host who feels regulation is in conflict with the state law. So any host who can document that they have been in operation and paying appropriate taxes for a period of time before a local regulation was put into place, it's authorized to continue operating as they were. It also allows local governments to maintain their own regulatory systems, including zoning and permitting, so long as it's not an outright ban. Most of the previous policy responses we discussed are still eligible under a law in this framework. So another subsection of law actually specifies that local organizations such as HOAs or co-ops can maintain local control, even instituting the bans. So Tennessee's law is an example of one of the more hands-off responses while preserving a large part of local autonomy. The state of Tennessee also has an agreement with Airbnb for the collection of all sales and use taxes. So on the other side of that would be a state like Arizona. Arizona has swung back and forth in recent years, first passing legislation which prohibited local governments from instituting bans and regulations across the board, though after some issues in cities dealing with housing affordability and event and party use, the state legislature most recently passed a law to include state-level restrictions on use and registration, specifically on their use for large commercial events by addressing a legal occupancy number. So they actually put in across the state a cap on the number of visitors for a short-term vacation rental. They also required all rentals in the state to include their tax ID in the listing to provide for easy enforcement and tracking at the local level. And similar to the state law in Tennessee, local governments maintain their right to pass local ordinances in regards to zoning and regulation. And while some of the local taxes remain the responsibility of local governments, the state negotiated for the collection of certain taxes that were already admitted to their Department of Revenue, and that the tax ID be posted so that it can be a tool for local governments to track and collect.
Well, thank you very much, Jackson. And to prove that I am completely self-serving, Jackson has to cite state code from Tennessee and Arizona, and I get to show pictures and screenshots of a successful implementation of short-term rental ordinances and regulations, that coming out of the city of Savannah. So I'm going to assume, which could be dangerous, that everybody on this call and webinar right now is a Georgian, so I don't need to explain to you that tourism is a huge industry for the city and region down in Savannah. So there was a lot to be gained from short-term vacation rental regulations in the city, and in particular in the historic district. So the city for several years now has had these ordinances and regulations in place, and I'm going to give you some screenshots and some examples of the processes that they've got in place that make sure that this industry is well regulated, well enforced, and the city is making sure that residents and neighbors in the historic district and really across the city are protected. So if you log on to the City of Savannah website, you'll actually see an entire page and an entire office devoted toward these short-term vacation rentals. And this includes beginning to end processes, everything from the initial application and registration of the property by the property owner as a short-term rental, all the way to the collections and tax remission that happen after a visitor's stay. It's an incredibly informative website, and if you go to savannahga.gov, you'll be able to get to that site and find a lot of information and valuable resources in learning how to form and shape your own community's regulations and processes. Now, as I mentioned, the first step that a property owner would take in Savannah toward having a short-term rental in their property is the application. And this is a downloadable PDF form from the Savannah City website, in particular the Department of Planning and Urban Design, and goes through the application process. And as you see on the screen here, there are a lot of requirements that go along with this, making sure that the safety, the privacy, the neighborhood, community feel are all preserved, and that everything is accounted for in terms of public safety and the interest moving forward. You'll see everything from the application and written certification form to the insurance documentation and HOA or condominium association board declaration approving the short-term rental of a particular property. Now, should that application be submitted and get approved, the City of Savannah issues this short-term vacation rental certificate. And this is akin to the license that a property owner would need to certify that they are able to use this property as a short-term rental. And this is just one example of a property in the historic district in Savannah. And one of the things that stands out that you see on the bottom there in the bold italicized font is that the certificate is only valid until a certain date. The city requires that this registration and licensing be done on an annual basis. So whenever someone applies for and is approved for their property being used as a short-term rental, that does not exist in perpetuity. It needs to be renewed on an annual basis. And this is an incredibly smart move on the part of the City of Savannah because it allows it to be revisited on an annual basis. Communities are ever changing, downtown areas are incredibly dynamic. Making sure that you can revisit this and you're not stuck with some sort of grandfathered authorization or some sort of grandfathered license is critically important. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is that something that's incredibly advantageous for communities, in particular communities working with interested citizens in tourism-heavy areas, is having that searchable database. And that's one of the things that the City of Savannah does have. And what you see here on your screen now is an example of that interface from the City of Savannah website where anyone can go on, this is publicly accessible, and look at all of the active short-term vacation rental licenses that exist across the City of Savannah. It includes the property number, the permit number, as well as the date it was issued and the date that license expires. So it's possible to stay completely in the loop, so to speak, as a property owner and as a neighbor on everything that's happening in your community. Another example of the form and process that the City of Savannah has in place are the hotel to motel tax remission forms. And you see an example of that, this fillable PDF form on your screen right now. Now, the City of Savannah has got a 6% hotel motel excise tax currently in place. And the property owners who have a registered short-term rental, we saw the license in the process earlier, every month are required to fill out the form that you see here. Even if they've not rented it out for any day, they still need to submit that form by the 20th of the following month. But this outlines all of the taxable collections that are made for that property that's licensed to be a short-term rental in the City of Savannah. So this gets remitted back to the city on a monthly basis. Obviously, the short-term rental can be a complicated process, so one of the things the City of Savannah has done is standardize these forms and made it as seamless as possible and hopefully expeditious as possible for the property owners so that there's no excuse for ignorance of the law whenever it comes to these submissions and these requirements. So working to streamline and working to communicate and ease that process for would-be short-term rental operators is critically important.
So they collect tax on their stuff in Savannah?
Great question, Jessica. Yeah, in Savannah, when the properties are registered, and we're going to look at the breakdown on the map here shortly, those properties that are registered as short-term rentals are required to fill out this monthly tax return with the city and collecting that excise tax and remitting that to the city as well. So the registered short-term rentals in the City of Savannah are required to collect and remit that excise tax to the city on a monthly basis.
That's smart.
Another tool that the City of Savannah has made available on their website is making use of geographic information systems and making use of technology in a very easy-to-use way. And what you see here is a screenshot of all of the currently registered short-term vacation rentals in the City of Savannah. The orange block that you see toward the top there is everything north of Forsyth Park in the historic district. And what shouldn't come as much as a surprise to anyone who's been to Savannah, there are a lot of short-term rentals in the historic district. So one of the things you can do with this map is actually zoom in, and what you see here is a spot-by-spot marking of all of the currently registered properties right near Oglethorpe Square, north of Forsyth Park in the historic district. And one of the things that the City of Savannah has done is actually limited the number of short-term rental properties that can exist in each ward of the historic district. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the term ward in the context of Savannah, if you look at Oglethorpe Square there in the top left of the screenshot that you see, everything in the surrounding blocks around Oglethorpe Square is considered the Oglethorpe Square ward. So as a part of their ordinance, the city of Savannah has capped the number of short-term rentals that can exist in each of those wards surrounding the squares in the historic district. Might be a consideration for your communities as you begin to look at your jurisdiction-specific needs and how your own communities are laid out. We know Savannah is very unique in this urban design and the form that they've got, so it will very much be a community and a jurisdiction-specific decision that needs to be made about that type of regulation. One of the other tools offered by the city of Savannah in their regulation process is the complaint form. So if you are a resident in the historic district or really anywhere in the city of Savannah, and there's a short-term rental where you think there might be a potential violation, whether that's a late-night noise violation or a parking violation or whatever violation might exist, there's a publicly accessible form on the city website, and you see a screenshot of that here on the screen, to file that complaint. And the city has got the enforcement capacity now with all of the resources coming in from the newly taxed properties. And they've got just the broader capacity as the city of Savannah to handle this enforcement and review these opportunities for improving the process. So making sure that citizens and residents of the community have the ability to voice their concerns and their frustrations and to challenge short-term rental issues that may be arising in the community is also important. So making sure that this is as transparent and easily accessible a process is just as important for residents and existing citizens as it is for the potential short-term rental owners and visitors. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jackson now to talk about some resources and updates that we have at DCA to help communities that might be going through this process.
As a lot of these are still fairly new, we are developing some resources right now, and the first step in that was to add this question to our annual report. So if anyone's filled it out or any local government's filled it out for FY19 at this point, you'll see this one change where we just ask, after confirming your ordinance, when it was adopted, the tax rate, and the subsection, to include if you're currently collecting for short-term vacation rentals right now or not. And that's going to help us, one, get a full list of which communities are currently collecting on the short-term vacation rentals, and then we'll be able to reach out and really create a bank of all the local ordinances and figure out what's even further what sort of issues communities are facing. And
Jackson, if I could inject here, I will make a request, just as our office is the Office of Planning and Research. One of the things that we do is collect ordinances from communities that adopt the hotel-motel tax in the first place. So one of the things we would ask is that if your community does indeed adopt an ordinance surrounding these short-term rentals, please share a copy of that with our office. We maintain jurisdiction files for every community in the state that collects the hotel-motel tax, and we would like to have those ordinances on file if you're going to expand that to include these short-term rentals. So please be in touch with our office if that does happen so that we can make sure we've got the most accurate and up-to-date information for your community.
Okay, thanks. And then to close it out here, just the resources that we can offer. We can provide examples of the different communities who are currently collecting hotel-motel tax. I've had some questions about that recently, just wanting to know if there's any other communities in the same region as them that have tried this and what sort of issues that they've run into. And so by having that conversation with us, we can probably save you the time of Googling short-term vacation rental laws and stuff like that. We've done that, and we've tried to save as many as possible. And we can share this with you. We can share conversations about their fee structures, different issues regarding enforcement and compliance. If there's a sort of resource that they use to help get an accounting of the different vacation rentals in their community. And then after FY19, we'll be able to include additional data on the hotel-motel tax regarding to short-term vacation rentals. So we'll be able to look at communities that have checked that box. Yes, we're collecting. What happened to their revenue? What happened to restricted money going towards tourism product development for their community, for tourism promotion? And as we go forward from FY19, we'll really be able to take a look at what kind of benefit these short-term vacation rentals will have on the hotel motel tax and the promotion of Georgia communities.
Absolutely.
And I'll inject here and say, this is Tyler again, and I had the opportunity to work with a lot of y'all on the call, I believe. So you know that I take the word nerd as very much a compliment in my line of work. So I've spent some time looking at the early FY19 submissions that we've received, and when it comes to the hotel motel tax, those communities that reported collecting on short-term rentals, year over year, every one of them has seen an increase. Some of them as high as almost 20% jump.
Wow.
When they add the short-term rentals to the taxable properties in their communities. So there's a lot of financial gain to be had in a lot of communities across the state. Obviously, tourism-heavy communities stand to benefit the most when you get mountain cabins potentially that are up for rental, or beach houses or properties in Tybee and St. Simons. But every community really does stand to benefit, because if you look at a map of Airbnb and VRBO properties, you will see it in every corner of the state. Said it before, I'll say it again, urban, rural, and all points in between. It is all over Georgia. So there's a lot to be gained moving forward.
Well, and if you think about it from the context that there are some cities that don't have necessarily like multiple large hotels, I mean, like, this is a way to like increase that revenue that's coming into the city, as well as potentially the Main Street program, because we have several programs throughout the state that are taking advantage of that 501c6 designation and are serving as a, destination marketing organization and can spend those hotel motel tax funds. So I mean, this is one of those things that's like, if it's not on your radar, it should be on your radar. That put it there, pay attention to it, and see how you can make this work for you and your community.
Absolutely. And as Jackson pointed out, Georgia is one of 4 states that doesn't have a statewide solution or arrangement in place for this. So the onus very much falls on local governments. Our cities, our counties, our consolidated governments need to be thinking about this and thinking of the potential benefits, not just financially, but also just to that sense of community that I've been harping on all morning. Yeah. When you know what's going on down the street, down the block, or even next door, it does a lot to really build that sense of community and that sense of belonging that I think we all appreciate, and one of the great benefits that Georgia has to offer all of us, regardless of where we are in the state.
I think it's always smart to address it before something becomes a problem.
Yeah, getting ahead of problems is always better than responding to them after the fact.
Absolutely. So thank you, guys. Let's see if we have any questions. Oh, we do. Okay. Give me a second. Is the state legislators or legislature, there we go, working on a state ordinance that we know of?
I will say that is a great question.
That is
a great question, and a very prudent question, considering the General Assembly session starts in a matter of about 2 or 3 weeks. Nothing that I know of at the moment. I know there are a lot of discussions that local leaders have been having with their legislative delegation, their state representatives, their state senators. I know a number of professional organizations have taken interest in it, knowing that there are opportunities for communities to put these ordinances in place. But I am not aware of any legislation that has been introduced or any bill that has been pre-filed at this point for the session regarding that issue.
Another good question. What is the number, or do we know the number of rural communities that have passed an ordinance regarding the collection of these STVR taxes?
No, I don't have an actual number on how many have. Like I said, it's a lot of times, obviously, as you would know, more difficult to enforce and account for. I know counties have passed one. Lumpkin County, Hall County have put them into place for anything out of the city boundaries. Far fewer. And like I said, in the next coming months, we'll be able to have a full list. I think we have a list of maybe 8 or 9 that have adopted ordinances, and a lot of those are obviously the largest jurisdictions. But yeah, if you reach out to the Office of Research after this webinar, I can see about how many of those might be classified as rural per se. Like Tyler mentioned, some of those are the coastal communities and the mountain communities are on the cutting edge of that.
Where you're getting those tourism dollars. And I guess the other thing too to keep in mind is that we would have a better idea once we kind of get through this fiscal year and have everybody that has reported and given us feedback as well.
Right. So the list that we have right now is based on us just sort of following the news in Georgia. As when we see local papers say that they've had a public forum or if they've passed an ordinance. So when we try to tabulate those, we can't confidently say that's an exhaustive list of everyone that's put one into place until we sort of get through this next fiscal year reporting and collect data on that.
And I've put up Tyler's and Jackson's contact information there on the screen, so you guys, if you want to reach out to them directly. And again, if you don't want to go back to this, you can always reach out to us at Main Street. We can put you in touch with them. I literally can walk like 2 doors down, one way or the other, and get one of them.
And a disclaimer, we are the Office of Planning and Research, but we are not out to get you as a community. We, much like Jessica and her office, DCA on the whole, we are here as a resource and a support mechanism. We want to help you be the best that you can be and take advantage of all the resources you've got. So know that you are safe in asking us questions. We are there to support you in whatever way we can. We're not going to go running to the Department of Audits and Accounts and turn you in for something if you ask a question. We are very much a resource and a support mechanism and want you to reach out to us in that sense.
We have one more question. Somebody asked, would you recommend waiting to adopt an STVR ordinance until we see what the state does this legislative session, or would you just go ahead and put something in the works?
That's very much going to be a local decision. If you feel comfortable waiting to see if anything comes out of the legislative session, then you are certainly welcome to wait. It is all very much just a local decision. One of the things I might recommend, if depending on whether you're a city or a county or consolidated government, reaching out to your points of contact with GMA and ACCG. Both of those organizations keep a much tighter eye on the General Assembly and activity that's taking place there. They might be able to be a better resource for you in terms of knowing what's moving forward in the General Assembly than we would be. We're an administrative, a bureaucratic agency, if you will. So we're responsible for kind of bringing all of those bills to fruition. But if you reach out to your contacts with GMA and ACCG, they'll be able to give you a much better insight, I would say, on what forward progress there is at something at the state level. But as Jackson was saying earlier, know that there are a lot of communities across Georgia that have already adopted these ordinances. A lot of communities, Savannah being the prime example, that are already going through the registration, licensing, tax collection, and enforcement processes. So there are a lot of standards from which to pull and a lot of communities from which to learn. That's, again, very much a local decision, but one that we are happy to help you with either way that we can.
Yeah, and I can't speak for the legislators or anything like that, but I mean, I think about even like the evolution of the hotel motel tax and how things were grandfathered in because people already had stuff in place. And so I think that this is an opportunity. If you feel like this would be a good fit for you, I would say, just my personal Jessica opinion, not a DCA, lawyer recommendation or anything like that, but just, if it makes sense for you to just go ahead and do something, because if there is something that happens on the state level, you could be grandfathered in, or if it's better on the state level, then you could adopt that. So it's one of those things that could work out for you, but I don't think it ever necessarily hurts you.
Yeah, and if you need to go back and revisit the ordinance later on down the line in response to something that does get passed at the state level, then obviously your governing body, your city council, county commission can do that. Very much a local decision, but we are here to support you either way. Jessica, if I can inject one thing, just a reminder, if your community has a hotel motel excise tax of less than 8%, and you are exploring the option of increasing that, one of the things to keep in mind is that requires a local act of the General Assembly. So if your community wants to increase from 5 to 6, 7, or even 8%, keep in mind that has to happen during the legislative session running from January through late March or early April. So you'll want to get the ball rolling on that pretty quick, and we're happy to help you with that effort as well if that is something that's being discussed in your community.
Very good point. Otherwise, you got to wait.
Yeah, you'll have to wait till 2021 if you don't get at it in the first quarter of this year.
Very good point. So thank y'all for joining us. We will make this presentation available on YouTube. So anybody who wants to view it or share it with their community or any of their city council members or stuff at a later time, it'll be there, and we'll also include a link to the presentation that you can just have access to it if you just want to be able to click through it and kind of and see some different things things on your own. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Tyler and Jackson, for being here.
Thanks to Jessica in the Office of Downtown Development. Thanks y'all for joining, and look forward to the next one.
Yep, and y'all have a happy New Year and a happy holidays. We'll see y'all later. Bye.